Welcome back everybody to the last video of our course on Intro to GIS and Mapping for Journalists. We've done a whole lot in QGIS. We've done some data analysis, we've created some maps. Now we're going to talk about exporting shapefiles out of the program to get them on the web. So we've really kind of touched on the analysis part up to this point, but obviously the next step is getting it online, letting the world see it. So we're going to touch a little bit on that in this course. So the first thing I want to point out is, which we've actually done a few times, but I just want to touch on it real briefly in terms of options that you have for exporting the data out of QGIS. First is the one we've been doing, is exporting as a shapefile. So go ahead and right click on your layer, your country's layer, which I have pulled up. If you don't have it pulled up, get it pulled up. And then go ahead and right click on it, hit export, save feature as. We've left the format alone at this point, so obviously if you want to do a shapefile, you can do that. This will be nice if you have someone else you're working on with the project with, and you've done some work, you've simplified some things, you might have done some analysis here and there, and they're going to do some more analysis or potentially visualize it, and they have QGIS or another program that'll open a shapefile. So you can export it as a shapefile and get it to them that way. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Again, as we've seen throughout the course, it adds a new layer on here as well. So another option is to get it ready for print. And this can mean a few different things. For us at the Texas Tribune, we use this setup when building maps to create like a print version that we actually pull into Illustrator, and then we clean it up, and then we put it on our website. So if you're familiar with Illustrator or programs similar to that, this is a good option to go on if you want to sort of do a lot of the work in QGIS, clean it up and make it look real nice in Illustrator, and then basically have it be an image or a series of images for the web. We're not going to talk about Illustrator in this class, but if you're familiar with it, this is how you would get there. So go ahead and go up to the project menu button at the very top, go down to New Print Layout, and then go ahead and type in a name. I'm just going to put Texas Tribune. You can put in whatever name you want. And this creates sort of like a blank sheet here, and anything that we put on here we're actually going to export as a PDF, and then from there we pull that PDF into Illustrator and clean it up. So you can do you can do the color changing in Illustrator, you can do it in QGIS. Kind of depends on you and what your expertise is in whatever program. There's a couple different ways you can go about this, but if you do at some point want the pipeline to include Illustrator, or if you just want to put the straight PDF online as well, that's also possible. This is how you would go about doing that. So we got the blank sheet. Go ahead and go over here to the add a new map to layout button, this little white button right here with the little green plus sign. Go ahead and drag very large on this little layout, the map that we're going to use, and you'll see what's interesting about this view is it basically whatever is in the viewer, like what you're actually looking at over here is what will show up. So let's go ahead and close out of this for now. I'm going to just show you kind of what I mean. Let's go ahead and let's just say we're going to be again pretty focused on the US for this example. Let's zoom in on the US. Let's go ahead and do that again. Once you create a new print layout, you don't actually have to create it again. You can actually go down to layouts and hit Texas Tribune or whatever you called it, so you don't have to go through that process again. If you delete that and you recreate the circle, you'll notice that it's now zoomed in on the United States. So this is really nice. Again, if you have data for a particular area, you can zoom in on that data. You can go to new print layout, and then it will show just that part of the map. So that's pretty nice. Another thing you'll want to add for sure, especially if you're getting it in Illustrator, this button right here, you can go ahead and again draw a little drag and a rectangle, let go. And what this will do is it will show like a little legend. This isn't super helpful for what we're working on because the only shapes we were using was the original countries, shapefile that we downloaded from Natural Earth, and then the one we just saved, which is sort of like a simplified version of it. So this legend isn't super helpful. But depending on what you do in QGIS, it may be. If you add a few layers, if you start labeling things certain ways, you start coloring things certain ways like we did before, then the legend becomes a lot more useful. But just know that that's how you put it on there. The other thing you'll definitely want to get on there is a scale bar, so that's the button right under there. So go ahead and draw like a little rectangle, and then you'll have a little scale bar. And this is default to kilometers, which will be fine for our example. So we got that on there. Go ahead and go up to layout and export as PDF. I'm just going to do US map. And I'm going to save it in this directory. We now have a PDF. Let me go ahead and open that up and show you what it looks like. Let me get to this directory it's in. And there we go. We have a PDF of the map we just created with our legend and our scale bar. Again, legend isn't super helpful in this instance, but it is there as an option. So it looks pretty nice. It's pretty sharp. You know, if we colored it a little nicely, you know, if we made that choropleth map that we did earlier, we put the legend on there and the scale bar, it actually looked pretty decent. And then again, if you want to pull it into Illustrator, you can make it look even sharper. One other option for that is if you go back and do layouts, you'll see your map is still loaded in here. You can go to layout, export as SVG. That is another option. Depending on what you're doing and what you're publishing and what you have at your disposal, and SVG may work as well. SVG is kind of like an image with code underneath it, but it's kind of like an image, so that might work for your cases. So, but feel free to kind of play around in that print layout mode. There's some other options. Obviously, you can export as an image. There's some other properties here you can mess with. I'm going to go ahead and export it as an image too, just to kind of show you what that looks like. This will save it as a PNG. You can set the resolution, you can set the page width and height, which is really nice. Go ahead and hit save, and there you go. Very similar map to the PDF, just a PNG, which might be what you need. So go ahead and close out all of that. Let's get back to this original map here. One last thing I'm going to plug real quick before we close out here. Go ahead and hit right click on this, go to export, save features as GeoJSON, which I mentioned very briefly in a previous video. GeoJSON is actually what you would need if you want to use code to make a map, which is we do that at the Tribune. Sometimes we use Illustrator, sometimes we use code to build a map for the website. We use JavaScript libraries to make that happen. So if you export to GeoJSON, that is a JavaScript native language that you can then open. If you write some code and use a JavaScript mapping library, you could get this map, or at least the shapes of that map, on the web using the library in this GeoJSON file. So a really kind of simple, rough explanation of what's going on here. We'll say that we do have reading materials on an intro to JavaScript, like class, and an intro to Leaflet, which is a mapping JavaScript library. So the idea is if you go through those two, you will be able to sort of put together a very simple leaflet map, which again is a JavaScript library, and write code to actually build maps. So I put those together for a conference, but they're available for anybody to use, and should take you a few hours. And the idea is you have no experience and you end up knowing a little bit, at least enough to put together sort of a leaflet map. So once you get to that point, you can make maps in Leaflet, and then you could export these shapes in GeoJSON. You could pull that GeoJSON into Leaflet, and then you could start using the Leaflet library to build these maps and get them on the web. And Leaflet has a real ton of really great features and is used by many news organizations and many other big and small companies. So it's really great in a lot of different ways. So let me go ahead and just export this real quickly. I'm just going to call this US again. Go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up. This is the GeoJSON file in case you're curious. This is going to look intimidating and hard to read. But again, once you get to the point where you know enough JavaScript to know how to use a mapping library like Leaflet or Mapbox, Mapbox is another popular one, that library can use this file and interpret it and recreate those shapes. And then you can use that to style it. You could add other points on the map. There's a lot you can do. So that's it for this course. We really appreciate you tuning in. We've gone through a whole lot. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've learned a lot. I encourage you to, now that we've gone through the process of editing data and opening shape files and coloring them and now exporting, I hope you create your own maps and kind of let the world see your creations, because that's what this is all about, is creating maps and letting the world see them. We have a Facebook group for this class, so if you want to export your files and work with them, whether it's Leaflet or Illustrator or just the PNG file, and get them out there in the world and have other people look at them and get feedback from people literally all over the world, that's a great way to do that. So yeah, just keep mapping. And thanks again for tuning in. Take care.